And we'll get started with the Planning and Zoning Committee meeting. I detected quorum with myself present, Councilmember Allen, Councilmember Benedict, Councilmember Horton, Councilmember Coopin, Councilmember Rutherford, and Councilmember Welch present. Thank you all for being here. We'll get started with the consent agenda. Excuse me, and I'll read off the numbers, and if anything needs to be pulled off, please let me know before I go through the captions. So for the consent agenda, we have RS 2024-539, 545, 546, 547, 548, 549, 550, 551, 552. Bills on second reading, BL 2024-392, 393, 394, 397, 398, 399. Those are the items on consent. Does anything need to be pulled off? All right. Nothing indicated need to be pulled off. I'll read through the captions. Starting with RS 2024-539, Toombs Porterfield Gamble Soror approves an agreement for the purchase of a parcel of property near the intersection of Youngs Lane and Baptist World Center Drive for a new fire station. RS 2024-545, Coopin Porterfield Gamble Parker approves a participation agreement between the Metropolitan Department of Water and Sewage Services and Split Rock Development to provide water service improvements for Split Rock's proposed development as well as other existing properties in the area. RS 2024-546, Porterfield Gamble Parker approves a participation agreement between the Department of Water and Sewage Services and Metro Nashville Airport Authority to provide water service improvements for MNAA's proposed development as well as other existing properties in the area. RS 2024-547, Welsh Porterfield Gamble approves an option agreement authorizing the purchase of property located at 334 Woodycrest Avenue. RS 2024-548, Gamble Parker amends ordinance BL 2019-18 of the Metropolitan Government to acquire permanent and temporary easements through negotiation, condemnation, and acceptance for the West End Place Stormwater Improvement Project for 5 properties located on West End Place and Central Avenue. RS 2024-549, Cash Gamble Parker amends ordinance number BL 2023-125 to authorize the Metropolitan Government to abandon additional public water main and fire hydrant assemblies and to accept additional public water main for property located at 1215 21st Avenue South, also known as VUMC Link Tower Revision. RS 2024-550, Cortez Gamble Parker authorizes the Metropolitan Government to accept new public water main, relocation of fire hydrant assemblies, and vertical adjustments to sanitary sewer manholes for 3 properties located at 6200 Banbury Station, 5976 Edmondson Pike, and Charles Park Drive, unnumbered, also known as Edmondson Pike Roundabout. RS 2024-551, Coopin Gamble Parker authorizes the Metropolitan Government to abandon existing public water mains and to accept new public water mains and public sanitary sewer manholes for 5 properties located on McGavick Street and Demumbrian Street, also known as Albion Music Row. RS 2024-552, Coopin Gamble Parker authorizes the Metropolitan Government to abandon existing sanitary sewer main and sanitary sewer manholes and to accept new public sanitary sewer mains and sanitary sewer manholes for property located at 109 South 2nd Street, also known as Titans Town. Bills on second reading, BL 2024-392, Porterfield, Allen, Toombs, and others, amends BL 2016-334, which authorized the Metropolitan Development and Housing Agency to negotiate and accept payments in lieu of ad valorem taxes from its leases operating low-income housing tax credit properties pursuant to the Tennessee Code annotated and revise the annual amount of abatement authorized for the program. BL 2024-393, Welch, Porterfield, Gamble, and others approves a lease agreement by and between the Metropolitan Board of Public Education and Nashville Tools for Schools. BL 2024-395, Coopin Gamble Parker authorizing Metropolitan Government to abandon a portion of existing utility easement for property located at 201 Shelby Avenue. BL 2024-397, Coopin Gamble Parker authorizing Metropolitan Government to abandon easements rights located at 17 Demumbrian Street, formerly a portion of alley number 114. BL 2024-398, Huffman Gamble Parker authorizes Metropolitan Government to abandon existing public utility and drainage easement rights for specific area property located at 3348 Lakeside Place. And BL 2024-399, Toombs Gamble Parker, authorizes the Metropolitan Government to accept new public water and sanitary sewer main, fire hydrant assembly, sanitary sewer manholes, and easements for property located at 407 West Trinity Lane. May I have a motion for the consent agenda? Oh, Councilmember Allen.
Sorry, Madam Chair, I just have a couple of questions. If I could take RS 2024, 539, and 547 off of consent.
547 and 549. Okay. Those two will come off of consent. Are there any other items that need to be pulled off the consent agenda? With that, may I have a motion? Thank you. In a second. Thank you. All those in favor, please say aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion carries. All right, we will go back to number 4 on your agenda, RS 2024-547. Approves an option agreement authorizing the purchase of property located at 334 Woody Crest Avenue. And we will go to Councilmember, well, first, may I have a motion? And a second? Thank you. And discussion, Councilmember Allen.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This had an appraisal that was just notably higher than what we were offering, and I just wondered if we could get an explanation of why we're offering more than the appraisal value.
Okay, is there anyone at the admin table that can speak to that? 47. 334 Woody Crest Avenue.
We're paying 1.5 million and it was assessed at 919,000.
Oh. Mm-mm. Okay, we will come. Okay. Yeah, we'll come back to that one. We're trying to get an answer for you.
Okay,
and
thank you.
We'll come back to that one.
Great.
We'll go on to RS 2024-549.
539.
539.
Sorry.
Okay. 539. Okay. Approves agreement for the purchase of property near the intersection of Youngs Lane and Baptist World Center Drive for a new fire station. May I have a motion?
Move approval.
And moved and properly seconded. Councilmember Allen.
Thank you. Same question. It looks like it was assessed at 343,000 and we're offering 3.1 million. I just wondered about the difference there.
Hi, Tom Cross. We have an appraisal at 3.1 million, which is the contract purchase price. I can't tell you about the tax appraisal, which is often way low.
Okay. And so we typically get an appraisal and the offerer gets an appraisal and we...
Not necessarily.
Okay.
If it's a certified appraiser, we're often willing to work with theirs.
Gotcha. And we were satisfied that...
Yes.
Okay. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. And actually, if we can move on and ask that question during budget, and maybe we'll have an answer at that time for the first question you had regarding 547. Okay. Thank you. With that, move for approval for 549. All those in favor say aye. Aye. 539, I'm sorry. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion carries. Thank you all. We were planning to have a presentation to discuss the housing and infrastructure study, but I understand today we are not going to have the presentation. Instead, Ms. Lisa Mulligan and Brett Weathers will be on the side. I totally forgot my bill on third reading. Regarding the presentation, we won't have that. So after we do this last bill on third reading, we can ask questions from Ms. Mulligan and Mr. Withers on the side. If you have any questions about the infrastructure study, we were sent emails by Brett Withers with information outlining the scope of the study. But if you have further questions, they'll be available after the meeting to answer questions. Going back to our bill on third reading that I just passed over. BL 2024-348 by Councilmember Coopin approves amendment number 8 to the Rutledge Hill redevelopment plan pertaining to certain uses. And there is a proposed substitute, and Councilmember Coopin is making his way to his desk. If you'd like to move the bill or the substitute.
I would love to move the substitute, please.
All right, any second? Moved and properly seconded? Please go forward.
This is just a housekeeping matter. We noticed a couple of issues with some of the language, and I believe the amendment was misnumbered, so everything is good with it, other than the housekeeping changes that are needed.
Any further questions about the substitute? All right, all those in favor say aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion carries. Do we have to move it as substitute? And now we'll move the bill as substituted. May I have a motion? Moved and properly seconded. Any discussion? With no discussion, all those in favor say aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion carries.
To go back to 547. Voted on it. And then answer the question at the next.
Oh, okay. And we also need to go on and approve 547, since we did take that off of consent. And we'll get that question answered for the budget meeting. All right, so moving RS 2024-547, may I have a motion? Moved and properly seconded. All in favor say aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion carries. Thank you all. Meeting adjourned.
And I'd like to make sure that that's a comprehensive picture of the sustainability of our infrastructure. Reviewing some fiscal analysis and studies conducted for other cities, as well as anecdotal evidence available for Nashville, I gather that the property tax that we generate per acre for a single-family home is generally inadequate to cover even the maintenance of the physical infrastructure that supports it, whether that's street or water or sewer, yet alone things like police, fire, and its proportionate share of other city services. Can you speak to whether the fiscal sustainability of current zoning compared to potential more high-density housing is going to be evaluated as part of this study?
Hi, so we will be looking at various aspects of infrastructure. First of all, determining where we have our existing zoning, if the infrastructure that's in place can support the zoning that's in place. We will also be looking at areas where there may be excess capacity of infrastructure, water, sewer, streets, the like, that may be able to support additional. We are still working through the final selection of the consultants and what type of analysis might go into that. I don't believe we have just a specific review of tax revenue, as that wasn't outlined as a part of the resolution, but we are looking at existing infrastructure capacity as well as future needs to serve the housing needs.
Councilmember Horde?
Yeah, I have a couple other questions as well, if that's okay, but I don't want to jump in front of other council members who might have questions as well.
You can go on.
Okay. So I guess on the fiscal analysis, whether that's part of it or not, I think the deficit that might occur due to single-family zoning on our infrastructure costs and maintenance is generally, in other cities at least, made up for by a surplus that's received from multifamily housing, which I think is troubling for a number of reasons, not least of which the occupants of that multifamily housing are typically lower income than the residents of single-family zoning. So we have a situation in which the poorer, more disadvantaged Nashvillians are subsidizing the wealthier and better off. It's kind of a system of inequality that's built into our infrastructure, our planning and zoning, and our tax system. I think the resolution does ask for analysis of how it affects communities of color or historically underserved communities. Will kind of this like distributive equity as far as infrastructure and housing be evaluated as part of the study?
We have written in an extensive look at disparities to make sure that we are not, to make sure that one area is not more burdened than another area in a lot of different ways in regards to cost or access to transportation or infrastructure, but also in regards to carrying excessive loads or carrying more housing than other parts of the county. So we have written in extensive evaluations of diversity and equity to make sure that we're looking at that.
Councilmember Horton?
Thank you. And I think on a similar note, I know, and spoken to Mr. Withers a couple times about the experience that other cities that have embraced kind of comprehensive upzonings or zoning changes, but haven't always seen the desired results as far as housing costs due to maybe it's called non-base zoning barriers, such as various overlays. Maybe I think the resolution cites Metro Historic, which maybe historic preservation districts maybe while not exempt, technically a lot of times are exempt as a practical matter from zoning changes. Will the study analyze kind of non-base zoning, things like this, and recommend legislative changes that might address those, including maybe the governance structures of those overlays?
I think what we don't want to do is sort of presuppose any outcomes, but we did include Metro Historic in the resolution, and they have been an active participant in helping us to work on the scope and come up with how we're moving forward. And so we're trying at this point to make sure that we're going in with open minds and facts-based and looking at all of the analysis before we make any determinations of what may or may not be preventing housing in different parts of the county. And so, but we've certainly come up with a broad enough scope that we can take into consideration those types of things, and maybe even building off of what we've seen happen in other jurisdictions where perhaps the zoning changes have not necessarily resulted in the amount of housing that may have been assumed for various reasons. And so we can sort of learn from other examples.
Councilmember Horton, we'll take one more from you.
Thank you. And this is my last one. I apologize for asking so many. I think during the discussions of bills 185 and 186, I think attending a lot of community meetings, a lot of people focused, I think rightly, on the perceived costs of change if either bill would be adopted. I think what was a lot of times missing was the cost of if we do nothing. Will the study, I guess, consider in any way different scenarios of change? Like how will different neighborhoods change if we do nothing versus how will they change if perhaps certain recommended legislative items are adopted?
Ms. Mulligan.
So there are a lot of, well, we have several other studies that are ongoing right now that will feed into this housing and infrastructure study that we're looking at. One of those being the Unified Housing Strategy. And part of what it is doing is identifying for us housing need and looking at sort of the different markets across the county. We're trying to be very careful in working with all of our partner agencies and internally the planning department to make sure that we're not duplicating work that's already being covered by another study. And so a lot of that work will be coming out of the UHS to feed into the housing and infrastructure. We're going to be piggybacking off of a lot what's happening in the 3MP to feed into this study as well. And so we're trying to be really strategic to make the best use of our time that you all have given us to look at this study, but also to make sure that we're utilizing staff resources and to the best of our abilities so that we're not duplicating. So a lot of that's going to come out of other studies as well.
And
Thank you.
thank you very much for answering my questions. And thank you again for being here today.
Thank you. Councilmember Benedict.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you to the planning table for being here and answering these questions. I want to ask just a few clarifying questions because this document is one that was distributed to council members. It certainly is open for the public to see, but I want to make sure the public understands what's in the memo. So some of my questions might be softballs to you, just to make sure that people understand what's going to come about from this. I guess initially, could you say that this and the study that's being done is being done in conjunction or not necessarily in conjunction, but true to, authentic to the mission, the purpose of the community plan that we call Nashville Next?
So if you look at the memo that we passed out, number one, under sort of the tasks, when we broadly define them, was land use policy and regulatory analysis. So looking at current land use policies that as they are on the ground today and looking at those in conjunction with infrastructure. So the land use policies derive from Nashville Next. And so we want to make sure that we're sort of looking at those and making and comparing those with infrastructure that's in place and zoning. A lot of cases we have where zoning and land use policy may not align. That's not unusual, but we want to make sure that we're doing an analysis. And so this is grounded in Nashville Next, of course, but it's also taking a look at some of those policies to make sure we're still in the right place.
Thank you, and that was my hope. So, looking at that, I guess, on the infrastructure, kind of following up from Councilmember Horton's questions, I know that NDOT is working on some things currently with multi-mobility, and of course, we also have the Unified Housing Plan that's being worked on. So as those come out, are we going to be able to implement them sooner? So for instance, are we going to be able to look at that mobility plan? I know that's NDOT, not planning, but do we anticipate some of those programs where the studies are being done this spring and summer, or community engagement is being done this spring and summer? Are we anticipating that those are going to be already in process as you are continuing your study?
So we have looked, oh, I'm sorry.
No, please, Ms. Mulligan. Yes.
So we have looked at all of the sort of timelines when it comes to the other studies, and everything sort of aligns pretty well. I would say that just because the input and community part of the 3MP is sort of earlier, it doesn't mean that the final findings won't be until later. That just happens to be early in that process. And so we anticipate that the findings of that will feed into the findings of this. I don't think that anything will be out of order necessarily. If nothing, or if anything, this may actually have to get ahead of some of those because of the time frame that was in the resolution. We may be sort of running ahead on this a little bit just based on the resolution timing.
Okay,
That was outlined.
thank you for that. And then, so it's going to look at, you mentioned land use policy and regulatory analysis. On the economic feasibility model, can you share a little bit about what that means?
So that would be economic feasibility model of different types of housing. So for instance, if there's a finding that a certain form of housing makes the most sense from to provide the housing that's needed, then we have to look at, is it actually feasible to build that type of housing in the economic market that we live in, and in different neighborhoods. So it's an understanding of, you can't just say you need this type of housing, be it flats or townhomes or whatever it is, without understanding if it's feasible to actually build that type of housing.
Okay, and I, Chair, one more, if I may. I just want to call out, so the third point there does say including design guidelines. So along those lines of earlier, design guidelines could mean that those historical overlays are preserved in the areas where they are, so that the design guidelines that potentially are in the community plan will be, I guess, this will. It says draft policy and regulatory alternatives, including design guidelines. That would be for anything potential that's new and what those designs might need to look like in the future. Is that what I'm reading? So for instance, let's say that somebody wanted to, do something with duplexes on a lot. We're not going to focus on outcomes. I know hypothetically, if we were to say we could cap that at a certain height or a certain lot coverage, is that kind of the idea that's there with that?
Ms. Mulligan?
Is that a little too detailed for the future?
I think at this point, I would say we want to understand the regulatory framework that we're operating within, potential changes to that regulatory framework, and that may include adopted design guidelines. And so it's broad for a reason,
Okay.
because we don't know what the outcomes are going to be until we get deeper into the analysis.
Well, I think the analysis is great. I'm excited that we're getting it done. I'm excited to learn more about it as we go through the process. Thank you so much, and thank you again, Chair.
Thank you. Any further questions? Councilmember Coopin, and then I saw Huffman.
Thank you, Chair. Can we can ask NDOT questions as well?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, I think Matt Purvis is here from NDOT.
Mr. Purvis. So curious how this study is looking at kind of transit car, bike access, things like that. And then as it pertains to density, are we looking at kind of how that affects what density should be in certain areas and corridors? Or can I get a little more context on that?
Mr. Purvis, or if you want to speak to the 3MP and how you all are going about that study. Oh, I'm sorry. Wait a minute. Let me get your public podium on. That'll help. There you go.
So I'm Justin Cole, planner for NDOT. For the 3MP project, one of the first tasks is kind of an overall assessment of our existing transportation infrastructure and all the modal networks, seeing how everything fits together, making sure we're building complete modal networks. And then another part of that is understanding how that connects with the land use and growth that we're seeing. And so that's where we're working closely with planning on that work so that that can kind of feed into the housing and infrastructure. So.
Councilmember Coopin, does that answer? Okay, thank you. Councilmember Huffman.
Thank you, Chair, for recognizing me, even though I'm not on the committee. Two questions. And I think one could be directed at planning, the other one at NDOT. So I'll let y'all, it'll be a jump ball. So whoever wants to go for it first. The first is around the characteristics of districts like mine. I'm kind of split. I've got part of my district in the USD. Probably about 75% of it is GSD. And I'm curious to elaborate further on the point that Councilmember Horton and Benedict also made in regards to just how this one comprehensive plan is going to be tough to have a one-size-fits-all. What steps are being taken to look at districts like mine who may be a little bit bigger lots, a little bit different than the rest of the county? And I'll stop for that one.
Ms. Mulligan?
Sure. So the study will have to take into consideration that we understand that that Nashville and Davidson County working in different environments is something that we do on a daily basis because of the vast array of not only lot sizes but topography and those sorts of things. And so that's something that we are equipped and used to dealing with. And so we will have to make sure that we're looking at a broad enough basis of or broad enough scope on the types of housing to make sure that we're addressing all of those different environments.
Okay, great. Thank you. Last question, and this is really in regards to the infrastructure issues that are going on currently in my district and how those would be prioritized, GSD versus USD. So I think that would probably be kicked back to NDOT. And really what I'm getting at is, let's say we've got a bus line, the number 6, for example, that runs right now once an hour. Are we looking at that as a model, or are we looking at a proposed transit referendum that would increase that to 15 to 20 minutes an hour?
Please introduce yourself again before you answer. Thank you.
Justin Cole with NDOT. So we are working with WeGo on the 3MP along with planning. So I think similar to what Lisa said, we recognize that there's different areas of Davidson County have different needs, and there's different strategies that might be appropriate in different areas in terms of mobility. So I can speak to for some of WeGo's specific aspects of it. They're having a particular focus on how they can serve, different areas of the county. WeGo Link is a program that they've been doing, but also, fixed route, expansion and that sort of thing. So, I think overall, it's sort of making sure that we're looking at all available strategies and what makes sense in different areas for different communities. So,
Thank you. Any further? Oh, yes. Councilmember Welch, you're recognized.
Thank you, Chair. And this is actually a question for the planning table. I wondered if you could give me an update on the interval study. That was the missing middle housing study that was contracted with the consultant back in the fall, I guess, and we should have had that report in February, and then now it's been pushed to April. And I'm just wondering when we can expect that report and what that says about missing middle housing here in the city and what we need to do to address that issue.
Thank you. Ms. Mulligan?
Sure. So that there is no final document for that. That was a analysis of some existing framework, but because this study has now been introduced to us and asked us to do that study, that has been now rolled into this. And so there is not a final report yet. It's been rolled into that as part of the background work that goes into this housing and infrastructure study.
So there won't be any specific report from them on specifically missing middle housing. It'll be
It's all rolled into this, yes.
All rolled into this. Okay,
Yep.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any further questions? All right. With no further questions, we will close this part of the meeting and adjourn. Thank you.